The twin suns hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the endless desert. Wind rolled over the dunes, carrying with it a dry heat that stung the skin and filled the air with dust. At the center of a shallow valley of sand, a young woman named Lyra could barely move. She was buried up to her neck, her arms trapped, her legs hidden deep under the weight of the earth. Only her face remained above the surface, her dark hair tangled and sticking to her cheeks with sweat. Her people had left her there at sunrise. They walked away without looking back. To them, she was no longer part of the tribe. She had failed in what they believed was her only purpose. The elders had declared her unworthy. Their judgment was swift, and the punishment was meant to end her life slowly, not by blade or fire, but by heat, thirst, and loneliness. Lyra tried to keep her eyes on the horizon. The desert stretched forever in every direction, golden and silent. She told herself not to cry, because tears would only waste what little water remained in her body. Still, her throat ached with dryness, and every breath felt like sand grinding against her lungs. Above her, a hawk-like creature circled in the hot sky, its sharp eyes waiting for weakness. She thought of the nights she had spent in her village, listening to stories around the fire. Those nights felt like a dream now. Her people had sung songs of strength, of family, of tradition. Yet when it came to her, all of those words had vanished. She was not seen as family anymore. She was a mistake, a reminder of failure. Her lips moved in a whisper, though no one could hear her. Why am I less than others? Why am I left behind? The wind answered with a long howl across the dunes. Hours passed. The suns climbed higher. Lyra's skin burned, her body trapped and unmoving. She thought of trying to shout, but her voice was weak, and she doubted anyone would hear her across the wasteland. Still, deep inside, she refused to let despair take her fully. Something told her that her life was not finished yet. She did not know why she felt that, but it kept her mind awake while her body suffered. By late afternoon, shadows grew longer once more. The desert cooled slightly, though the air was still dry. Lyra closed her eyes, imagining herself free, imagining her legs able to run again across the sands. She was drifting between waking and dreaming when a sound broke through the silence. It was soft at first, almost like the shuffle of wind over stone. Then it grew clearer, the crunch of footsteps pressing into sand. Her eyes opened wide. She strained to turn her head, and there in the distance, a figure moved slowly across the valley. It was not one of her people. The walk was different, steady, and strong. As the figure drew closer, she saw the outline of clothing not woven from her tribe's fibers but stitched from thicker material. The figure carried a small pack on his back, and at his side walked a smaller form, a child. Her heart pounded in her chest. A man and a boy. They were not of her world. Their features were different. The man's hair was lighter, his face shaped in a way unlike any in her tribe. The boy looked curious, pointing toward her as they neared. Lyra's dry lips tried to form words. At first nothing came out but a rasp. Finally, she found her voice. "Help me." The man stopped a few steps away. His eyes, sharp and thoughtful, scanned her from head to toe, noting the way she was buried. He did not speak right away. He seemed to measure the situation with care. The boy tugged at his arm, whispering something in a tongue she barely understood. The words were foreign, but the tone carried worry. Finally, the man crouched beside her. His voice was calm, steady, and though she caught only part of his meaning, she felt the warmth in his tone. He asked her something, her name perhaps. She answered in her own language, "Lyra." He repeated it, a little clumsy on his tongue but respectful. Then he reached down, pressing his hand against the sand near her shoulder. He looked at the boy, gave a nod, and began to dig. Lyra's eyes filled with tears that she tried to blink away. No one had touched her with kindness since her punishment began. She had thought she would die alone, her body swallowed by the desert. Yet here was a stranger, one not even of her kind, breaking the rule of her people by giving her hope. Grains of sand shifted as his hands worked, strong and patient. The boy, though smaller, copied him, scraping at the sand with his fingers. Little by little, the weight pressing on her chest eased. She could feel air reaching deeper into her lungs. "You are safe now," the man said, his words accented but gentle. She did not understand all of it, but she understood enough. His tone carried promise. The sun slipped lower toward the horizon, painting the desert in red and gold. For the first time that day, Lyra felt the air cool against her skin. The weight of despair lifted, replaced by something fragile but bright hope. She had been cast aside by her people, yet saved by one who owed her nothing. Her eyes followed the man's face as he worked. There was no anger in him, no judgment, only determination. The boy glanced at her often, his wide eyes filled not with fear but with concern. As the sand was cleared from her chest and arms, she finally felt the freedom of movement. Her weak hand rose shakily from the pit, trembling in the fading light. The man reached out without hesitation, gripping her wrist firmly, pulling her further upward. When at last her shoulders were free, she took a breath that felt deeper than any she had drawn in days. She whispered again, "Thank you." The man gave a small smile, nodding once. The desert had taken everything from her that morning: her place, her people, her worth in their eyes. But as night approached, it had given her something new. A chance. The desert night was colder than stone. The heat of the suns vanished quickly, leaving sharp winds to sweep over the dunes. Lyra shivered as the stranger and his boy continued to dig her free. At last her legs were uncovered, stiff from hours trapped in the sand. She could not stand on her own. The man slid his arm carefully under her back and lifted her as if she weighed no more than a bundle of reeds. For a moment she feared being carried by someone she did not know. But when she looked at his face, there was no cruelty there. His jaw was set with determination, and his eyes carried a softness that surprised her. He turned his head toward the boy and spoke in their strange tongue. The child nodded quickly and ran ahead, as though guiding the way. They crossed the valley slowly. The man moved with strength, but even he seemed to tire under her weight. She thought of offering to walk, though her legs trembled too much to hold her. Instead she rested her head lightly against his shoulder, grateful for the warmth of another living being after so many hours alone. At the edge of a rocky rise stood their camp. A small fire crackled, built carefully in the shelter of tall stones to keep the flames from the wind. Beside it lay a pack and simple tools, and near the fire rested a bed of cloth where the boy had been sleeping before they found her. The man lowered her gently to the ground. The boy hurried over with a blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. She felt the fabric against her skin, softer than anything her tribe would have allowed her to use. The man crouched near her, studying her face in the firelight. He pointed to himself and spoke a single word. "Daniel." She blinked, repeating the sound with difficulty. "Dan-il." He smiled faintly and gave a short nod. Then he pointed to the boy, who was busy pouring water from a flask into a small cup. "Ben." The boy looked up at the sound of his name and gave her a shy smile before holding out the cup. She took it with trembling hands. The water tasted sweeter than any drink she had known. She swallowed carefully, forcing herself not to gulp too quickly. Her throat ached, but the relief spread through her like cool rain over hot stone. "Lyra," she whispered at last, touching her chest. Daniel repeated it the way she had before, slow but respectful. Then he added something in his language that she did not understand, yet the warmth in his voice eased her heart. As the night deepened, the fire glowed brighter against the dark. Lyra sat close to it, wrapped in the blanket, while Daniel prepared food from his pack. The scent was unfamiliar but pleasant. He gave her a share, and though her stomach twisted from long hunger, the taste filled her with strength. Ben ate quickly, then leaned against his father's side, his small eyes heavy with sleep. When the boy finally dozed off, Daniel adjusted the blanket over him, then looked across the fire at Lyra. His face was thoughtful, as though weighing questions he wished to ask. Lyra lowered her eyes, ashamed of the truth. She knew her own people would never have saved someone like her. They believed she had no value. How could she explain that to this stranger? At last Daniel spoke slowly, pointing at her, then at the desert beyond. His brows furrowed, as if he wished to understand why she had been left there. Lyra shook her head, pressing her hand over her heart. Words stuck in her throat. She did not know if he would even understand them, but she whispered anyway. They said I am less. Daniel's gaze softened. He did not speak further, but the way he looked at her told her he understood enough. There was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet anger at what had been done to her. Silence settled over the camp. Only the crackle of fire and the soft breath of the sleeping boy filled the night. Lyra pulled the blanket tighter, fighting the memories of the morning when her people buried her. Yet now, under the care of strangers, she felt something she had thought gone forever: safety. The desert winds howled, but the fire held strong. Daniel adjusted his pack and then leaned back against the rocks, keeping watch. Lyra closed her eyes, telling herself she would not sleep, but exhaustion pulled her down. When she woke again, dawn painted the sky in pale colors. The suns were rising, but the cool air still lingered. Ben was already awake, feeding small sticks into the fire. He saw her stir and smiled brightly, waving at her in greeting. Daniel returned from beyond the rocks carrying a container of water. He knelt beside her and handed it over. She drank gratefully, then watched as he packed their belongings. His movements were efficient, practiced, like someone who had traveled far and long. She wondered where he came from, what world he had left behind. She knew of humans only from distant rumors, told by traders who spoke of their courage and stubbornness. To see one here, lifting her from the sand with his own hands, made the stories feel alive. When Daniel finished packing, he looked at her and pointed toward the open desert. He then gestured to himself, to Ben, and finally to her. His meaning was clear. He wanted her to come with them. Her chest tightened. Part of her feared slowing them down. She was weak, her steps uncertain, and she knew nothing of their language or ways. But the thought of remaining in the desert alone filled her with dread. Slowly, she nodded. Yes. Daniel smiled again, a small but steady smile, then helped her to her feet. She leaned on his arm as they began their walk across the sand, Ben skipping ahead with youthful energy. As they moved, Lyra realized that something had shifted within her. She had been thrown away by her own people, yet a human who owed her nothing had chosen to carry her instead of leaving her to die. The desert had shown her cruelty, but through Daniel and his son, it also showed her kindness stronger than she had ever known. The journey across the desert was slow, but Daniel never hurried Lyra. When her legs shook, he paused. When her breath grew shallow, he offered water and let her rest in the shadow of a rock. Ben walked ahead most of the time, always turning back to smile at her, as if to remind her she was not alone anymore. By the time they reached the edge of the desert, the suns were high. The sand gave way to dry grass and scattered trees. Lyra had never seen this part of the land. Her people never traveled so far, claiming it was cursed. Yet to her tired eyes, it looked like paradise. The sight of shade and the sound of birds lifted her spirit more than she expected. Daniel led them into a small valley where a river flowed gently. He knelt beside it, filling a flask, while Ben splashed happily in the shallows. Lyra crouched at the edge and let the water run over her hands. The coolness was a gift she thought she might never feel again. She bent forward, drinking until her thirst eased, then washing the dust from her face. When she looked up, Daniel was watching her. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a quiet relief. He seemed pleased she was regaining strength. She offered a small smile, the first true smile she had given in many days. They set up camp under a tree. Daniel spread blankets for her to rest, while Ben helped arrange stones for a new fire. Lyra sat, still weak, but her heart lighter than before. She watched the father and son work together, their bond clear in every movement. She had seen fathers in her own tribe, but many were distant and stern. Daniel was different. He guided his son with patience, even laughing when the boy dropped a stick and had to chase it down the slope. As the fire grew, Daniel prepared food. He offered Lyra a portion first, making sure she ate before taking any himself. This small act stirred something deep inside her. No one had shown her such kindness in her old life. To her people, worth was measured by what one could give. To Daniel, she was given value without needing to prove anything. After the meal, Ben sat beside her with a wide grin. He spoke quickly in his human tongue, his hands moving with excitement. Lyra did not understand his words, but his joy was clear. She laughed softly, shaking her head. He tilted his head, then pointed at himself. Ben, he said again, slower this time. She touched her chest. Lyra. He repeated her name with a child's playful energy, then leaned against her side as if they had known each other for years. Warmth spread through her chest at the boy's acceptance. She had been cast out by her own people, yet this child had welcomed her without hesitation. That evening, when the sun dipped low, Daniel sat near the fire with tools in his hands. He worked on repairing a small metal device, its parts shining in the light. Lyra watched curiously, leaning closer. He noticed her interest and lifted the tool, showing her slowly how the pieces fit together. His words were foreign, but his gestures explained enough. She nodded, fascinated. In her tribe, women were never taught such skills. She realized then that humans did not seem bound by the same rules. Daniel did not hide his work from her. Instead, he shared it. For the first time, she felt she could learn more than what tradition had allowed. Night deepened, and the stars filled the sky. Ben fell asleep quickly, curled under his blanket with a peaceful face. Daniel kept the fire alive while Lyra rested nearby. The sounds of crickets filled the valley, and the gentle river flowed endlessly. Lyra lay awake for a while, staring up at the stars. She thought of her people, of how they had left her behind. A part of her still ached at the loss, but another part whispered that she might be better without them. In this small camp, she felt more at home than she ever had in her own village. The next morning, she woke to the smell of food. Daniel was cooking again, while Ben chased a bird through the grass, laughing. She sat up, surprised at how much stronger she felt. The stiffness in her body was fading, replaced by steady energy. After breakfast, Daniel handed her a wooden stick shaped like a walking staff. He showed her how to use it for balance as they moved through the valley. She tried it, slowly at first, then with more confidence. He gave a satisfied nod, clearly pleased with her progress. They traveled together through the day, following the river until they reached a small shelter made of stone and wood. It was simple but strong, built near the water. Daniel opened the door and motioned for her to enter. Inside, the place was neat. Blankets lined one wall, tools hung carefully on another, and dried food was stored in jars. It was not grand, but it was safe. Lyra stood in the center, looking around with wide eyes. "This is your home," Daniel said softly, though she only understood the last word. He touched his chest, then spread his arm around the room. "Home." She repeated it slowly. "Home." The word felt heavy with meaning. Daniel placed a blanket on the ground for her and showed her where she could sleep. Ben ran to her side and pulled her hand, eager to show her small objects he had collected. A shiny stone, a carved piece of wood, a small feather, he laid them in her palm proudly. She held them carefully, touched by his trust. Days passed in gentle rhythm. Each morning, Daniel taught her small things: how to cook their food, how to repair a pot, how to cut branches for fire. She learned slowly, but each step filled her with pride. Ben stayed close to her, calling her name often, laughing when she smiled back. At night, they shared meals by the fire. Lyra told stories from her people, using gestures and drawings in the dirt when words failed. Ben listened with wonder, and Daniel's eyes never left her face as she spoke. In this quiet shelter, Lyra felt something she thought she would never know. She felt wanted. She was no longer an outcast, no longer a burden left to die in the desert. She was part of something new, a family. The days passed gently in Daniel's shelter. Lyra grew stronger with each sunrise. Her hands, once weak and trembling, now worked beside his as she carried wood, cooked food, and fetched water from the river. Ben followed her everywhere, asking questions in his cheerful voice, even though she still did not understand all of his words. She answered with smiles, gestures, and laughter, and somehow that was enough. But peace never lasts long in a land where old traditions rule. One morning, as the suns rose over the valley, Lyra went to the river to gather water. The light reflected off the surface, calm and bright. She bent down with her flask, but a sound made her pause. Voices. Deep and harsh, coming from beyond the trees. She froze, her body tense. Figures appeared on the opposite bank. They wore the markings of her people, their clothes woven from the same desert fibers she had once worn. They were hunters, strong and armed with spears. When they saw her, they stopped. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then one of them spoke her name sharply, his voice carrying anger. Lyra's heart pounded. Shame and fear rose inside her. These were men of her tribe, the same tribe that had buried her. Their eyes showed no kindness, only surprise that she was still alive. She turned quickly and hurried back toward the shelter. Daniel was outside, sharpening a tool. He looked up at once when he saw her face. Her hands shook as she tried to explain with broken words and gestures. He understood enough. Danger was near. Moments later, the hunters emerged from the trees, crossing into the valley. Their eyes locked on Lyra. One of them raised his spear, pointing at her as he shouted in their language. He accused her of breaking their laws, accused her of defying the judgment of the elders. His words cut like stones, even though Daniel could not understand them. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Lyra and the hunters. His voice was calm but firm. He spoke in his own tongue, shaking his head, making it clear he would not hand her over. The hunters did not understand his words, but his stance was enough. He was not moving aside. Ben clung to his father's leg, his small eyes wide with fear. Lyra stood just behind them, her chest heavy with guilt. She wanted to run, to beg for forgiveness, to escape the weight of her people's anger. But when she looked at Daniel, she saw no fear in him. Only resolve. He would not abandon her, even when the whole desert demanded it. The leader of the hunters barked another command. He gestured for Lyra to return to them, to face her punishment again. His tone carried the certainty of tradition, as if no one could possibly deny him. But Daniel shook his head once more. He lifted his chin and spoke strongly, his voice like stone against the wind. The words were simple, but the hunters felt the strength in them. He would not obey. Confusion spread across their faces. They had never seen anyone defy the elders so openly. Among her people, no one would dare. Tradition was law. Yet here was a human, a stranger, standing without fear. Lyra felt a tremor inside her. She had believed for so long that the laws of her people were unbreakable. Yet Daniel broke them with nothing more than his will. His courage was like a fire, spreading warmth through her fear. The hunters muttered among themselves. They were not prepared for this. Finally, they lowered their spears slightly, though their eyes still burned with anger. The leader spat into the dirt, a sign of contempt, and turned away. One by one, they followed him back toward the trees. Silence filled the valley once more. Lyra's knees weakened, and she sank onto the ground. Daniel turned to her, his face steady. He crouched down, lifting her chin gently so she would meet his eyes. His voice was soft now, but his meaning was clear. He would not let them take her. Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow but of relief. She whispered her thanks, though the words felt too small for what he had given her. That evening, the three of them sat close to the fire. Ben leaned against Lyra's side, his small head resting on her arm. She stroked his hair gently, her heart swelling with affection. She had been left to die because she could not give children, yet here was a child who treated her as family. Daniel watched them quietly, his eyes thoughtful. He knew the hunters might return. He knew this choice had set him against a whole tribe. But he also knew he could not live with himself if he betrayed the woman he had saved. The clash of cultures was now clear. Her people believed she was worthless, but humans believed differently. To Daniel, value was not measured by tradition but by the person herself. To Ben, she was already part of their small family. When the fire burned low, Daniel spoke a few words in his language, looking at both of them. One word stood out, repeated slowly until Lyra understood. Family. She whispered it back, her voice unsteady but sure. Family. The stars stretched wide across the sky, silent witnesses to the new bond that defied old laws. For the first time, Lyra did not feel like an outcast standing between two worlds. She felt like a bridge. Thomas woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The sun had not yet climbed high in the sky, but the soft glow of dawn had already started to fill the valley. He stretched his arms and looked around the quiet house. The warmth of home surrounded him, yet his mind carried a storm. Last night's discussion with Illyra still echoed in his thoughts. Her words about hope, change, and freedom had touched something deep in him. He moved to the kitchen to prepare a simple breakfast. The sound of gentle footsteps followed soon after. Illyra entered, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She looked more relaxed than before, as if the heavy shadow of her punishment was slowly lifting from her. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Thomas replied with a small smile. "I made tea. Would you like some?" "Yes, thank you," she answered, taking a seat at the table. They sat together, sipping tea in silence for a while. It was a comfortable silence, not the kind that pressed heavily on the chest but the kind that gave space for thoughts to grow. Finally, Illyra spoke, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. "Thomas, do you ever wonder why your people and mine live with such different rules?" Thomas set his cup down and leaned back in his chair. "Every day," he said. "On Earth, long ago, people used to make harsh judgments too. But over time, they learned that kindness and fairness made life stronger for everyone. We still make mistakes, but nothing like what happened to you." Her eyes softened. "It gives me hope. If humans can change, perhaps my people can too." Thomas studied her expression. "Maybe you will be the one to show them," he said. Illyra shook her head lightly. "I am only one woman. And in their eyes, I have no worth because I cannot give children." "You have worth," Thomas said firmly. "More than they can see." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment. She did not answer, but her eyes shone with gratitude. Later that day, Thomas took Illyra outside. He showed her the fields where he grew food, the orchard with fruit trees, and the small barn where he kept tools and supplies. As they walked, the children ran ahead, laughing and chasing each other. Illyra watched them with a smile. "They remind me of my little cousins," she said quietly. I used to play with them near the river before everything changed. Do you miss them? Thomas asked. I do, she whispered. But even if I went back, they would not welcome me. They would turn their faces away, afraid to be seen near someone marked as useless. Thomas placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You are not useless here. The children already love you. I see it in their eyes. Her smile returned, brighter this time. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Thomas and Illyra sat outside on the porch. The night sky was wide and full of stars. The air carried the faint hum of crickets. Illyra, Thomas said after a pause, do you ever think about the future? Her eyes lifted to the stars. I used to, she said. But after my punishment, I stopped. There was no place for dreams in a life buried in shame. Now, maybe I can dream again. What kind of dream? Thomas asked. She thought carefully. A life where I can wake up without fear. Where I can work, laugh, and share my thoughts without being judged. A life where people are valued for who they are, not for what they can give. Thomas listened closely. Her words touched him deeply, and he realized something. She was not only speaking for herself. She was speaking for every woman and man in her world who lived under such rules. That sounds like a future worth fighting for, he said. Her eyes turned toward him, shining in the starlight. Would you help me, Thomas? Not just to survive, but to build something new? Even if it is only a small start here, in your valley. His answer was steady. Yes. Whatever you want to build, we will build together. The next few days were filled with small but important changes. Illyra began helping more with the household tasks. She taught the children songs from her people, and they sang with joy. She showed Thomas how her village used herbs to heal minor wounds, knowledge he had never known. In return, Thomas taught her how to plant vegetables in neat rows and how to use simple tools to make work easier. It was as if two worlds were quietly blending into one. But outside their valley, rumors had already begun. People whispered of the woman Thomas had taken into his home. Some said she was cursed. Others said she was dangerous. A few, however, wondered if perhaps she was a symbol of something greater, of freedom, of a new way of thinking. One afternoon, a neighbor visited Thomas. The man was cautious, his voice low. Thomas, is it true? Did you take in one of them? Thomas looked him straight in the eye. Yes. She was left to die, and I could not stand by. The man hesitated, then nodded slowly. You always had a strong heart. Be careful, though. Some will not like this. Thomas thanked him, but inside, he felt the weight of what was coming. He knew that keeping Illyra safe might soon become more difficult. That night, as the family gathered by the fire, Illyra sensed the unease in Thomas. Something troubles you, she said gently. He sighed. Word is spreading. Some may come to question us. Illyra's expression grew serious. Then perhaps it is time I tell you something. There are others like me, others who have been cast out, hidden, or punished. They live in silence, but they long for hope. If they hear of what you did for me, they may come here too. Thomas felt a chill at her words. The valley was peaceful, but could it remain so if more came? Still, he could not ignore the truth. Then let them come, he said finally. No one deserves to be buried in the ground for simply being different. Illyra's eyes filled with quiet strength. For the first time, she did not look like someone broken by her people's laws. She looked like someone ready to lead. The stars outside glimmered, and the night grew calm. Yet in that calmness, something new was stirring. Not just between Thomas and Illyra, but in the hearts of those who whispered of her story. The mornings in the valley had grown peaceful. Lyra now moved with confidence, helping Thomas with household chores, tending to the small garden, and teaching Ben simple games she remembered from her childhood. Her days were full of small joys, yet she could not forget the world she had left behind. The desert, her old village, and the tribe that had cast her out lingered in her thoughts like distant shadows. One afternoon, as the suns hung high in the sky, the wind brought a strange sound. At first, it was faint, a soft crunching over the grass, but gradually it grew louder. Lyra froze, her body tense. She glanced at Thomas, who was chopping wood near the fire, and then toward the hills beyond the river. Figures appeared along the ridge. At first, there were only a few, but soon more followed. Lyra's heart sank. Her old tribe had come. Their markings were unmistakable. Faces she had once known stared back at her. Their expressions were stern and filled with anger. Lyra, one of the elders shouted in the harsh tone she remembered all too well. You were taken in by a human. You defy the laws of your people. Return with us at once. Thomas stepped forward, his hands raised slightly but firmly. She will not go with you, he said in his language. The elders did not understand, but the tone carried strength. Lyra felt a mixture of fear and relief. Fear because she knew the tribe's anger could be dangerous, relief because Thomas did not waver. He was determined to protect her. The leader of the tribe, a tall woman with stern eyes, stepped closer. You have broken our traditions. You dishonor your family and your people, she said sharply. Thomas remained calm. He pointed at Lyra, then to himself and Ben, as if to make clear that she was part of their family now. His stance showed the tribe that she would not be taken by force. Lyra's heart pounded. Could they take her anyway? She remembered the sand, the sun, and the shame of her punishment. She had hoped never to see that again. Yet Thomas's quiet courage gave her strength. The elder's voice rose again, louder this time. If you do not return, you will be shunned forever. You will live as an outcast, and your name will carry dishonor. Lyra looked at Thomas. She felt a wave of fear, but also something new, determination. I will not go back, she said clearly. Not with them. My life is here now. The tribe muttered among themselves. They were shocked that she spoke, that she defied them openly. In their world, obedience was expected. Yet here was a human camp, and a woman who had been cast aside, standing without fear. Thomas stepped closer to Lyra. You are safe here, he said quietly. No one can take you unless you want to go. The tribe hesitated. Their eyes scanned the small camp, noting the fire, the shelter, and the presence of the boy. They had never seen humans like this. Their world had taught them that humans were weak, but the calm strength of Thomas made them question everything. One of the younger men spoke quietly, almost nervously. Perhaps we should leave. She seems protected. The elder's eyes narrowed, but she finally nodded. We will return, she said sharply. The law is still clear. You may survive for now, but remember, the elders will not forgive this defiance. With that, the tribe turned and walked back toward the ridge. Lyra watched them go, her body trembling, yet a strange sense of relief washed over her. She had faced them, spoken for herself, and not been taken. Thomas crouched beside her and took her hand gently. You were brave, he said. You stood for yourself when no one else would. Lyra nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I could not have done it without you, she whispered. Ben ran up to them, holding a small bundle of flowers he had picked near the river. He handed them to Lyra with a proud smile. For you, he said simply. Lyra accepted the flowers and smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She realized then that family was not just about blood or tradition. Family was about care, protection, and love. She had found that here, with Thomas and Ben. Over the next few days, Lyra's presence in the camp grew stronger. She helped Thomas repair the shelter, organized the garden, and taught Ben small lessons about the world around them. The bond between them deepened with each passing day. Yet Lyra also thought about her tribe. She knew they would return, perhaps with more people, perhaps with greater anger. But she no longer felt powerless. She had a home, a family, and allies who would stand by her. She realized that change could begin with courage, even in a single person. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Lyra sat beside Thomas and Ben. The fire burned warmly, casting long shadows across the valley. "I am not afraid anymore," she said softly, her voice steady. "I know they may come again, but I will not run. I will stand here, with you." Thomas placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "And we will stand with you," he said. Ben nodded enthusiastically. "Yes," he said. "We are family." Lyra smiled at the boy. The simple words filled her with hope. She realized that her life had changed completely. Once, she had been buried in the desert, cast aside for being different. Now, she had a family, a home, and a future to protect. The stars began to appear one by one in the night sky. Lyra looked up, feeling the vastness of the world around her. She understood that the path ahead might be difficult. Her tribe might challenge her, and obstacles could come, but for the first time in her life, she knew she had the courage, strength, and support to face anything. She reached out and took Thomas's hand, holding it tightly. He squeezed hers in return. Ben leaned against her, resting his head on her arm. In that moment, buried fears and old pains faded. Lyra felt the warmth of belonging, the quiet power of love, and the strength of choice. She was no longer defined by her past or by what others thought of her. She was defined by the life she was building here. The valley was quiet that morning. The suns rose slowly, painting the landscape in gentle shades of gold and amber. Lyra stood near the river, watching the water flow over smooth stones. The sound of it was calming, steady, like a heartbeat. She bent to scoop some into her hands, drinking slowly and savoring the cool freshness. Thomas approached from behind, carrying a small bundle of tools and seeds. He smiled at her. "Ready for today?" he asked. Lyra turned, her face brightening. "Yes," she said. "Let's work in the garden first." Together, they planted new vegetables in neat rows, teaching Ben how to dig small holes and press seeds carefully into the earth. The boy's laughter rang across the valley as he worked, spilling water over his hands and splashing on the soil. Lyra joined in, her laughter mixing with his, creating a sound she had not known she could make freely. After hours in the sun, they rested beneath the shade of a large tree. Lyra leaned against Thomas, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. She looked at the boy, who was lying on the grass with his eyes closed, holding one of the small flowers he had given her earlier. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt truly at peace. The desert, her punishment, and the fear of rejection from her people felt like memories from another life. Here, she had a home. Here, she had family. Thomas studied her quietly. "You have changed so much," he said softly. "Not just in strength, but in spirit." She looked up at him, smiling. "I had something to change for," she said. "I had a reason to live, and it was this being with you and Ben." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We are glad you are here," he said. "I cannot imagine life without you now." Lyra's heart filled with warmth. She had been buried in sand and left to die, cast aside by a world that did not understand her. Yet here, with Thomas and Ben, she had found a place where she was valued, loved, and respected. She realized that this was not just survival, it was living fully for the first time. Days turned into weeks. Lyra's presence in the valley became central to their small family. She organized the garden, tended the animals, and prepared meals. She taught Ben songs from her childhood, and he sang them proudly, sharing laughter with both of them. Thomas continued to work alongside her, teaching new skills and learning from her knowledge of herbs and plants. The bond between them grew steadily. Lyra felt the comfort of routine and the joy of small achievements. Every day, she realized more clearly that the family they had created was stronger than any tradition or law that had once dictated her life. One evening, as the sun set in soft reds and purples, they sat together on the porch of their shelter. The fire burned warmly, casting flickering shadows across their faces. Ben leaned against Lyra, his eyes heavy with sleep. Thomas held her hand gently, his thumb tracing slow circles on her skin. Lyra spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never thought I could have a life like this. A family. A home. I thought my worth was gone." Thomas shook his head gently. "Your worth was never gone," he said. "It was hidden, waiting for someone to see it. And now, we see it every day." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. She leaned into him, feeling the strength and safety of the life they had built together. Ben stirred slightly, murmuring in his sleep. Lyra smiled and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. The small gestures felt like the most powerful proof of her place in this new world. Weeks later, a faint sound reached the valley. Lyra paused, her body tensing as she recognized the sound of approaching footsteps. She glanced at Thomas, whose face was calm but alert. It was her tribe again, returning to see her. Lyra felt a surge of fear for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. She was not the same person who had been buried in sand. She was strong, and she had allies. This time, when the tribe appeared at the edge of the valley, they saw something different. Lyra stood with Thomas by her side, Ben close behind. She did not cower or beg. She met their gaze directly, her eyes steady. The elder spoke first, her voice sharp but cautious. "You have defied us," she said. "Your life is not ours to claim. Why do you remain with these humans?" Lyra raised her chin. "Because I am alive. I am valued. I have a family who cares for me. You cast me aside, but they did not. They taught me that my life is mine to live." The tribe murmured among themselves. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others looked away, uncomfortable with her confidence. Thomas stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Lyra's shoulder. "She is part of our family," he said clearly. "No one will harm her here." The elder's expression softened slightly, as if she could see that the human man spoke with honesty and strength. Slowly, the tribe began to withdraw, realizing that their authority held no power here. Lyra watched them leave, her heart steady. She had faced the people who had once condemned her. She had spoken for herself. And she had survived not through fear or obedience, but through courage, love, and the support of her family. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Lyra sat by the fire with Thomas and Ben. She felt a deep sense of peace. Her past, though painful, had led her to this life, a life she could embrace fully. Thomas looked at her, his expression tender. "You have changed the world for yourself, Lyra. And perhaps, in time, others will follow your courage." Lyra smiled. "I hope so," she said. "But for now, I am happy here. With you. With Ben. This is everything I could ever want." The boy stirred slightly, hugging her arm. Lyra hugged him back, feeling the warmth and safety of the bond they shared. In that quiet valley, under the vast sky, Lyra realized something profound. Life was not measured by what others demanded of her. Life was measured by love, courage, and the family you choose to protect. She looked at Thomas, then at Ben, and whispered softly, "I am home." Thomas squeezed her hand. "Yes, you are home," he said. Ben yawned, smiling in his sleep. Lyra leaned back, watching the stars, feeling the wind on her face, and knowing that her life had truly begun. She had been buried once, cast aside for being different. But now she was alive, strong, and loved. Her past could not touch her anymore. She had built a new world for herself, a world where courage, kindness, and love were stronger than fear and tradition.